Good evening, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. I hope you are all doing very well. And we are playing some more Golgari in Modern. The deck, so this is Sunday, November 17th, I believe the date is? 18th. Sunday the 18th. And BG Rock or Golgari decks just put up 3 copies into the top 32 of this weekend's Modern Challenge, and 2 of them were in the top 8, and 1 of them was the victor. And slowly but steadily, our favorite archetype, Golgari, has been putting up more and more results ever since this card, Assassin's Trophy, came out. So it's a very exciting time to be playing this deck, and yeah, I'm determined that we can bring this deck to the very top of Modern. So we are on the play with a hand that looks pretty reasonable. In terms of our direct interaction, it's a little lacking with the new favored sun being present, but of course being a little bit more ideal as a late game card. And then in terms of direct interaction, we don't have much. However, we have some recursive pieces of very powerful interaction. We just need to draw a third land. We're on the play with a couple of Tarmogoyfs as some early threats, so I think this is a certain keep in a blind game 1. Our opponent will keep 7 and open on a Leyline of Sanctity. Well, okay then, now I'm kind of glad I don't have any turn 1 interaction, specifically discard spells, because that would feel pretty bad. So, main deck Leyline, I'm not really sure what to think. It could be Bogles is probably the likeliest, but we will have to see. So it's just going to be a Blooming Marsh and pass from me. Temple of Enlightenment, alright, that is not Boggles, that is for sure, so that's an Ad Nauseam land, and I have seen some Ad Nauseam players main decking Leyline if they're in a very interactive meta. We draw a Fatal Push. Whatever they're up to, it's probably not going to be a very good draw, but we do get to play a Tarmogoyf and hope we can still hit our third land on curve. They've got a Plains, and they've got a Runed Halo. Okay, this is not Ad Nauseam either, and I'm starting to think it's some kind of enchantment-based deck. So maybe some kind of enchantment prison or something like that. Ooh, pretty brutal. So what do we do here? We could play another Tarmogoyf, but that accomplishes very little because they're locked out by Runed Halo. So I think we just have to trophy this thing. Ramping them is definitely not good, but we are in a position where we don't have much of a choice. Gotta get proactive here. I don't think just playing another Tarmogoyf is going to accomplish all that much, but we still desperately need to hit a third land. They're going to cast Prison Term, okay? Enchanted creature cannot attack or block. Activated abilities cannot be activated, so this is basically a pacifism for the purposes of Goyf. However, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may attach Prison Term to that creature. That's a pretty cool one, not gonna lie. Definitely a spicy, spicy card. Okay, we did get our third land, but it is a treetop village, so our first Tarmogoyf is still in jail. No fun there. Opponents making all their land drops, and of course we helped them to pull ahead of us with that trophy, and now they have Sphere of Safety, and this is a pretty rough one. This is like a ghostly prison that scales based on the number of enchantments. So now we know for sure that this is just like an all enchantments style deck. And yeah, now we have to use all of our limited mana just to get one Tarmogoyf across, and if they play another enchantment, then we're totally locked out from attacks. On top of all of that, we still don't have double black for our Lilianas, so we are just very, very far behind. We could play an Ooze. Yeah, I don't think their graveyard is that important, so we could play an Ooze, but going wide is not very relevant here against a Sphere of Safety, so I just get in for 2, but either way it's looking pretty bleak. Opponent's tapping out for another something big. Another Sphere of Safety. Alright, we're just completely locked out. And we draw. Our land is just not complying with us here. I mean, we might as well play the ooze, and sure, they'll put it in jail. I just need them to show me a win condition here, basically. Ruined Halo. Okay, we're really locked out. Maelstrom Pulse remains our best draw, but even if we get to Pulse away, you know, a couple spheres, we're still now not doing anything with our Tarmogoyfs, so that's pretty bad. Alright, more lands, definitely not good. But we will play a Liliana of the Veil. I guess now our best hope is to tick her up toward ultimate and then pulse away the ley lines so we can ult them. That is probably our most realistic win con at this moment in time. They've got a Ghostly Prison. Now we're really not attacking. Not that we were before, but now we're definitely not. Alright, so we'll play our other Liliana because sure, why not? Ticking up, ticking down doesn't really matter here. Ticking down lets us potentially mill over a creature and buy it back, but and you know, okay, so we could maybe find a Tasigur or a Tracker and start getting some more cards that way. But I think ticking her up is also fine because that's like gonna be a pretty immediate win con if we can maybe ult with Liliana of the Veil and amass an army of zombies and then get in there before they can restabilize, you know, something like that. But either way, we're on a pretty hard lockdown here. And they're tapping 7 mana, that can't be good. Okay, Enduring Ideal. So this is the main win condition of the deck. This is the namesake card of the deck. These Enduring Ideal decks are around in Modern. This appears to be a blue-white one, but I've seen white-red as well. So this is blue-white Enduring Ideal, and so this is a sorcery that lets you tutor an enchantment straight onto the battlefield. It also has the keyword epic. For the rest of the game, you cannot cast spells. At the beginning of each of your upkeeps, copy the spell except for its epic ability. Alright, well, that cannot be good for us, obviously. And they go tutor up a Dovescape, so this is very, very good for them because it's going to counter our non-creature spells, right? So now drawing like Maelstrom Pulses, trophies, none of that is going to get through. It just gets countered by the Dovescape. And of course we get to make a bunch of birds off of it, but we cannot really attack at all anyway. And then it's also going to give them a win condition, right? Because they can cash in redundant enchantments. Well, I guess, never mind, they can't do that because they cannot cast spells anyway because of this, but I guess in some progressions, if they just naturally cast this, they can get some birds as well for an alternate win con, but they're just going to keep tutoring up enchantments, so we might as well keep ticking the Lily up and play it out a little bit more, see what they do. So they get to copy the epic spell, huh? What's it going to be? Form of the Dragon. At the beginning of your upkeep, Form deals 5 damage to any target. At the beginning of your end step, your life total becomes 5. Creatures without flying cannot attack you. Yeah, that'll do it. They've just got us on a 4-turn clock, and we are on total lockdown. Again, we can't cast anything. We can't cast non-creature spells. We cannot target them with Liliana's ultimate. So we're pretty dead. We draw another Lily, the Last Hope, and yeah, we'll just scoop it up. We got by the Enduring Ideal deck. They had some nice early plays, but really our deck lost to itself there. We were just way too clunky for way too long. Couldn't cast our Planeswalkers on curve, which is really what we needed to do to have a chance of beating them before they assembled just this unbeatable lock. So felt pretty rough, but definitely a matchup that we are still okay against. Like, they do have some ways to stymie our interaction, but we remain a deck with a lot more copies of good interactive spells against what they're up to than most decks in the format. So we got pretty roundly defeated in this game 1, but let's go to the sideboard and see what we can do against Blue-White Enduring Ideal. Okay, everybody, sideboarding against Enduring Ideal, and right off the bat, these two cards are two of our best. Anything that kills their permanence is something we are interested in. Golgari Charm, of course, is destroy target enchantment is the mode we want here. I don't know if they have any kind of permanents that produce tokens besides Dovescape. I guess that could be relevant, but really this is just a spot removal for an enchantment. And that's also true for Maelstrom Pulse, which also can potentially get some 2-for-1s here. These Nile Spell Bombs are not very good. I don't think they use the graveyard in any meaningful way. And Engineered Explosives, is this a card we want to consider in the maybe board? Of course, the big problem here is it's limited to only hitting things 2 or less. I don't know how many 2 CMC enchantments they'll really have, but they did show us a Runed Halo, so this card's not totally dead. We'll put it in the maybe board because we need to see what comes out in the main deck. Fulminator Mage, I think we want this card here, right? Because they do have to reach 7 mana to cast the Enduring Ideal. They're casting Spheres of Safety on 5, and I think some of these decks play a Lotus Bloom, but I don't know that that's, Lotus Blooms are necessarily stock. They could be, but I don't think we can expect them to be universal. So, and whether or not they have those, they didn't show them to me here. I think Fulminator Mage is a perfectly fine card in the matchup. Nissa Vital Force, that's going to be a yes from me. Her -3 might not be all that useful, but her +1 is actually going to be pretty sweet. A 5/5 with haste might be one of our best attackers against, Ghostly Prison style pseudo-locks in terms of putting on a fast clock, and it also can't be enchanted by their cards like Prison Term, and they cannot name our lands effectively with Runed Halo, because, even if they play a Runed Halo naming Swamp, we just animate a forest. Of course, her -6, her ultimate, can also be very, very good if the game's going long. So she's in. This is a white-blue deck, but they showed me a bunch of basic planes. Blue is clearly the splash color, and I don't think they showed me an island, if I recall correctly. I think it was just cards like Glacial Fortress. So, even though we do kind of want to attack their mana, it's not with Choke, not that way. Languish, they're not playing creatures to speak of, so no Languish, no Kalitas. No Collective Brutality. Hand Disruption is going to be very good against them, but not if it can only take instants or sorceries. Again, this is like an all-enchantment, all-the-time deck. While this can hit Enduring Ideal, so that's not nothing, but, even the Drain mode being dead to Leyline, yeah, I don't think we can bring this in. In fact, we might cut some from the main. We'll have to see. Duress, on the other hand, we for sure want. This is going to hit anything we care about. Surgical Extraction, I think, is a maybe board card. It's going to depend on whether we have the main deck slots or not, but I could see Surgical doing some good work here. Of course, if we can hit an Enduring Ideal, that's great, because it is kind of a combo deck, right? It's like a combo prison deck. But even hitting a high-value card like Sphere of Safety could be very reasonable here. We will have to see what we don't like out of the main deck. So we have 6 cards coming in, and 2 maybe board cards to consider. And what don't we like? Well, I'm going to continue with the trend of cutting a land in these long grindy matchups. I've been enjoying it lately, against control variants and against that Abzin, value deck, stuff like that we've played recently. So I'm gonna do it here, see how it plays out for us. Now, what else don't we like? I think 4 Fatal Push is a pretty free cut here, and we only need to make 1 more cut for sure, potentially a couple more if we want to get those in. I think Inquisitions and Thoughtseizes all stay. Collective Brutality is definitely a card we can consider coming out. And let's see, we've brought in some threats, right? Fulminator Mage is kind of half of a threat. Nissa is a threat as well, so maybe we should cut a threat here. And I think Scavenging Ooze is the clear weakest one. Tarmogoyf is great. Tracker is great. Taziger is great. These cards are all either our best clocks and or advantage engines. Skooz, the life gain, not relevant. The graveyard interaction, not relevant to my knowledge. So that is the clear worst threat. I think we can cut that. Is there anything else we don't like? Abrupt Decay is great. Trophy is great. Pulse is great. Liliana the Veil is great, for sure. Liliana the Last Hope, I'm a little less excited about, because her -2 shouldn't be that relevant. They're not putting that much into our graveyard. And her +1 is going to do literally nothing, as far as I can tell, besides ticking her up toward an ultimate. So we could consider cutting both of these, honestly, as well. Kind of an interesting call. So I guess the good news is we're free to bring in these two cards for sure. Take another quick look. Yeah, we still don't want any of that other stuff. So we've got 5 cards that we're pretty happy to bring out, and we're going to leave 2 of them in. Well, what if we just start off like that? We can cut a Lily, cut a Brutality. And I kind of like this, and maybe I like the first Brutality over the third Scoos, because, again, at least this can hit Enduring Ideal. At least this can drain them for 2 if they don't have Leyline, right? So yeah, I think this is a pretty sweet setup against this Enduring Ideal deck. I think this is looking like a really strong 60, and that's what it will look like, all organized by CMC. Yeah, looking strong to me. So, alrighty, let's go to game 2 and see how it treats us. Alright, my friends, game 2 against Enduring Ideal. We're on the play, and our hand is pretty medium, right? It functions, we've got a functional hand, but Treetop Village is a great threat in a lot of games, but here they have so many effects that tax attacking that firing up a man-land, using the mana to do that, and paying the tax just for a 3/3 is not realistic in a lot of board situations. So we are free to play it on turn 1, so it's still kind of a free inclusion, but it might not be that useful. Tarmogoyf is in theory great, but we need to find more interaction to make it big and make it worthwhile. Liliana the Last Hope is deeply medium here, and we cannot even cast her. So the hand functions, but it's very, very weak. The big redeeming factor here is Tireless Tracker. Tracker is a card that we are going to be able to hopefully leverage to great effect. Obviously as a threat, and card advantage here is just completely fantastic. So as underwhelming as this hand is, I'm going to keep it on the power of Tracker and just on the fact that it is a functional hand, and I have faith in the deck to provide. Now our opponent's taking a pretty heavy mulligan down to 5. So they went to 5, they have no Leyline. Unfortunately, we cannot punish them for that with a discard spell, we just have to pass. Temple of Enlightenment. They're going to scry. We draw an Inquisition. Okay. Definitely a good draw, and definitely one that I considered playing there. But like I said in the sideboard tech, I don't think they play all that many enchantments on 2. They showed us Runed Halo, and I'm sure there might be 1 or 2 others floating around, but really I want to make sure I discard them before they hit their 3rd land drop. So Goyf this turn into Inquisition next turn is going to be an acceptable sequence to me, especially because we don't want to play the Tracker out on 3 because they could have Oblivion Ring or something to that effect to get rid of it before we get a clue. So as clunky as this has the potential to make our next turn, I think that was the correct sequencing, and sure enough, they have a Runed Halo, so we're maybe a little bit punished for that, but still not too bad. Now we do have we do have a Blooming Marsh, so we have the ability to have a more mana efficient turn, but we don't want to do that for 2 reasons. Number 1, and by do that I mean play Liliana. For 2 reasons. Number 1, like I said, we do want to fire off this discard before they hit their next turn, because once they start playing 3 drops, that can be a lot more of a problem for us. And number 2, as things stand, we cannot even go Tracker into land for clue into Inquisition next turn because we don't have an untapped black source in hand. So, as much as it hurts to waste this mana, I think we have to fire off the Inquisition here. And we see Glacial Fortress and Enduring Ideal. So, remember, they took a pretty heavy mull, so They only have 3 land right now, and they're a long, long way from Enduring Ideal. They have a Nevermore. As it enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card name. Spells with a chosen name can't be cast, so this is kind of like Meddling Mage on an enchantment instead of a 2/2 human. Now, this is not that great against us just because of the sheer variety of spells that we have. If they want to name an interactive spell, they have to get pretty lucky to blind name the one that we're going to have with this, right? They could name Maelstrom Pulse, and we still have Trophy and Decay and what have you. So there's Nevermore. It's still an option, though, to take. And then there's Greater Aromancy. Other enchantments you control have Shroud. Enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. So this is just kind of a card that forces you to remove it before you start removing the other things. So if I say that I probably can deal with them playing a Nevermore blind next turn, I guess I take the Aromancy here, because that way if I draw interaction and then they find pieces I care more about, even if it's just me wanting to get rid of this Runed Halo, which they named Lily of the Veil with, by the way, I never mentioned that, then yeah, we want to get this Aromancy out of the way, so that's what we'll do. And of course the other benefit of playing Inquisition there is it makes our Tarmogoyf, it wakes him up, he's a 2/3, so the 10-turn clock is on. That is for sure. They play the Fortress, and yeah, here comes the Nevermore. So they've got Lily of the Veil locked out by Runed Halo, and they're going to name Trophy here. All right, fair enough. We will untap, and we will find a Hissing Quagmire. All right, good enough for me. We were always going to go Tracker into land, so I guess getting to deploy a man land there is not too bad, even though, like I said, it might not be realistic to fire them up very often in this game. Still not too mad about it. And there's an Oblivion Ring. Okay, so yeah, like I said, that would be a risk to running out the Tracker without having gotten a clue off of her first, so at least we have the clue. And we've gotten Abrupt Decay right off the top. Now, that was a pretty clutch draw. So there's a lot of tasty targets on the field, that is for sure. But I think the play here is just to get our Tracker back, make another clue, and play out our Liliana. So we could have also cracked another clue there. That would have been fine. But this deck just isn't that well known to me, and indeed it's not a solved archetype or anything like that. So, I don't know, maybe they do have some Wrath of God style effects. That's certainly a possibility. So just kind of diversifying our win conditions here. We're just planning to tick the Lily up and threaten to ultimate and force them to answer her along with dealing with our board. They've got a Ghostly Prison. All right, that'll potentially slow down our attacking. We find another Tireless Tracker. Interesting draw. Definitely an interesting draw. But here with the prison taxing us, instead of playing that out, I think I want to just, I think I have more than enough clues to win this game. I've just got to make sure I actually win it, right? So I'm definitely interested in clocking them here. We've got to pay 4 to do it, but that's well worth it to swing for 7 and put them down to facing lethal next turn. We'll take up the Liliana, of course. They've still got her to deal with. And opponent will play a land and scoop it up. So we just kind of brute forced our way through that. Our Inquisition taking Aromancy proved to be nice because we got to get our Tracker back as soon as they O-ringed it. We got her back. We never missed a clue because we got a clue the turn we played her, and then we decayed the O-ring before we played a land the following turn. So we never missed a clue. We got to grow her a little bit. The Goyf was a medium-sized 3/4, but the initial couple hits and then being joined by the Tracker, it proved to be a quick enough clock where they just couldn't handle it. Now, they did mull to 5, and we did have a fairly decent progression. Not the best, but certainly not the worst either. So that was a pretty nice clean win. They scooped it up on turn 6. We're pretty happy about that, but it might be a little bit tougher next game because they're going to be on the play. So let's see how it goes. All right, everybody. Game 3 against blue-white Enduring Ideal, and our hand is pretty solid. I think this is a pretty solid, like a B plus hand. We have turn 1 Thoughtseize, Blooming Marsh into Thoughtseize. Now, granted, they are a Leyline deck, that could be shut off, but if they have a Leyline, that is okay. We still have a Maelstrom Pulse to answer Leylines if that ends up being the play that is called for. We also have a Liliana of the Veil that is very, very good in the matchup if we can play around curve. Now, right now, we actually cannot play around curve, but they're going to probably provide at least one target for Field of Ruin. So if we absolutely need to, we can fix our mana, at some point in the early stages of the game to make sure we get our Lily down early enough to have an impact. So we don't have a clock. Our mana is slightly suboptimal. And they could have a Leyline, which makes our hand notably worse, but I think this is still a keep for sure. Our opponent's going to keep 7. Pretty rough. So they did Mull to Oblivion, not Oblivion, I guess. 5 is still the amount of cards that you can win with, but they mulled low last game. But game 1 and now game 3, they kept a 7 with Leyline, which is very, very bad for us, because if they are going to have a Leyline, which is a tough one for us to function against with some progressions, we at least want them to have had to mulligan once or twice for it. But the fact that they didn't have to go down on resources to get hexproof off the gate, right out of the gates, is pretty bad. So Treetop Village is, it not a very good draw in all honesty, because we still need double black, but at least we get to play it without having had anything better to do. Okay, so our opponent only has 1 land, so they kept a 1-lander with a Leyline, a 1-land 7 with a Leyline. It seems like they need a lot of lands to function, but I guess they probably have a high land count, so that's a keep that was certainly seems justifiable to me, but I am no expert. But anyway, the fact that they are only on 1 land is, of course, pretty nice for us. We draw a tracker, not too exciting for the moment, but... Alright, they found a 2nd land. It's a Glacial Fortress, so they've got to let it come in tapped. We draw a Swamp. Okay, so Liliana of the Veil is now castable on curve. We could also run out a tracker, little risky without a land to follow her up immediately, or we could pulse the Leyline and plan to have a potentially double spell turn. But again, the problem with that is similar to game 2. We don't have a black source for turn 4, so even going tracker into a land into Thoughtseize is not viable, and then we'd be putting off the Liliana for 2 full turns, and that does not seem ideal to me. So for that reason, it's time to just lead on the Liliana. We're just going to make this a Liliana game, and there are far worse things to do than that. And of course we have the Maelstrom Pulse to take care of this Leyline. If we get her to the ultimate threshold, that'll be really nice. So here, because they're a little land screwed, I kind of rate the Fields of Ruin here pretty high. Maybe I can start, at least thinning out their deck of lands, or taking them off of blue if that matters, with these fields. So, for that reason, I picked the Forest. We have 2 green sources already. Shouldn't need a 3rd. Opponent's got a Suppression Field. Activated abilities cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. Well, that is very, very good. It's going to tax our Lily, it's going to tax our Clues, and it's going to tax our Field of Ruin activation. Yeah, that's a very, very good one. Okay, they're still stuck on 2 land, though, so that's pretty good for us. We find another Lily. Alright, interesting. So, here we have a few options. We could just pay 2 and tick the Liliana up and just be really aggressive with her. That's okay, but it's becoming a little bit less appealing. Suppression Field is definitely something that I don't want to, just have no turns because I'm dealing with a Suppression Field. And if I do that, I cannot do anything else. I couldn't even field first and then pay the 2 because field activation itself is taxed. So I think what I'm going to do here is just take a turn off of interacting just to play the tracker, get a clock down, make a clue. That way, kind of no matter what they do from here, I have a diversity of threats and I have options, I have choices. And right now they're not taxing my attacks, so at least I can start putting a respectable clock on. They do find a third land, and they find something to tax my attacks. Ghostly Prison. Fair enough. I like this printing, by the way. That's a pretty cool one. Yeah, fair enough. So we will draw a land. Okay. It's time for the Maelstrom Pulse. We've just got to get the suppression field out of the way. They have more Ghostly Prison style effects than suppression field style effects from what I've seen and based on what I know. So for that reason, I think we are more interested in making this a Liliana game. And that said, we also can still attack through the prison right now. It's just not efficient. We're going to pitch the Thoughtseize because it looks more and more like the ley line is going to stick around at least for a little while. We could also pitch an extra Lily, and maybe we will at some point, but if they have a way to deal with her, doesn't hurt to have the other one around. And we'll just pass, ready to crack a clue on the end step, or indeed in response to another suppression field if they have it, but they don't have that, they have a Journey to Nowhere. So, yep, this is just going to exile the tracker until I can deal with that card. And we'll crack a clue, finding an overgrown tomb, not the most exciting, and a Field of Ruin is also not very exciting. But let's start out by cracking a clue, get more information. Inquisition of Kozilek, these are a few bricks. Inquisition is shut down by the ley line. So what do? Well, we're going to take up the Liliana, pitch this Dead Inquisition. We are at the alt threshold, but unfortunately we do not have an out to ley line quite yet. So we'll play a Hissing Quagmire. And here I'm just going to field them, again, just to kind of thin out their deck from land drops and maybe eventually shut them off of blue. I don't know if that matters, and I don't know if we can. They might not play a basic island, though, so we're just kind of thinning out our own deck and their deck from lands, which is beneficial for me on both ends at this point. They find an Oblivion Ring. So they are staying in it. They're taking care of our Lily. This is why we kept the other copy around, though. We can just go right back on the Lily train. Ooh, and we find a Nissa Vital Force. Obviously an amazing card. In any matchup you bring her in, she's just that good. Like, if you brought her in as a 5-drop, it's not something you do lightly, and it is because she's amazing. So this is a really feel-good card in that sense. Like, anytime you see a Nissa, it's like, aw, yeah, Nissa's here. Definitely a big fan. Now that said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we play the Nissa, play a land, untap a land, then we can pay for the Ghostly Prison, exactly, and do nothing else. So that's live. But they only have 2 cards in hand. Obviously they're no lands, so they have gas. They have gas, and, you know, we have some extraneous lands. We don't need that much. So I think I'm supposed to play the Liliana out here, but that is an interesting question. I definitely rate this pretty highly, though, taking something out of their hand here. What's it going to be? It's going to be an Enduring Ideal. All right, you know, they're pretty far away from casting that, so that makes sense for them to pitch, but at the same time, I'm certainly not sad to see it go. And once again, we're just going to really aggressively Field of Ruin them, making them less likely to draw lands, which I assume they need. And they are off of blue, for whatever that is worth. They've got a Ruined Halo. Alright. Tarmogoyf. That's a fair enough blind name, because of course now they're just hoping that we cannot clock them, because they're safe from the Liliana Ultimate as long as this Leyland's around, so they have to hope we cannot clock them before they can, you know, draw more gas and more answers off the top. We draw an Inquisition, so we are bricking pretty hard. It must be said, a lot of our draws have been pretty dead, but we've had a few really important ones. The Tireless Tracker did a lot of work. These Lilianas have been great, and now we have Nissa Vital Force. So we'll take up the Liliana, and we get a copy enchantment out of their hand. So hey, look, taking them off of blue was relevant. And this is, wow, it's just literally copies an enchantment. Fair enough. And it doesn't even have the downside of a card like Phantasmal Image. So that's a pretty cool little incentive to be in blue. This card actually looks really powerful in this deck. Because, of course, you have the tutor effect of Enduring Ideal, but if you cast that, you're probably just going to win anyway. And, this helps you really solidify the lock in the mid-game. Super interesting piece of tech. I like it a lot. That said, it is out of their hand, and we're going to animate a swamp, smack them for 5. Gotta pay 2 for the prison tax, but we will happily do so. Opponent top decks a Plains. Alright, good news for us. Verdant Catacombs. Interesting. So this leads us to a choice here. We could -6 and we would be cashing in the Nissa, we would be losing her. But then we play the Catacombs, we draw a card. We fetch with the Catacombs, we draw a card. It's like Tireless Tracker without any mana investment. It's very, very good. That said, you know what else is very, very good is firing up a land and attacking them for 5, especially because a lot of their answers to it are cards like Journey to Nowhere, Oblivion Ring, Ruined Halo, Prison Term. None of this stuff lines up well against Nissa's +1. So the fact that we can play so neatly around all that stuff means that we should probably just tick her up, especially because if we still decide we want to alt her next turn, we can do that and then go back to just ticking her up again. So here we have enough mana to pay for both our forest animated by Nissa and our treetop village. And I actually, just shocked with my fetch there without looking. I actually did not need to. We could have saved the 2 life, but that does not matter at all in this matchup, so I didn't really think about it. And, yeah, that was pretty good. We've actually got lethal next turn as well. The Treetop Village is increasing our clock by 1 turn. Opponent plays a Temple of Enlightenment, which is going to let them scry, but that's not going to do anything for them. And they are simply dead on board. So Nissa Vital Force turning the corner so quickly and with such resilience to their answers that they could have had off the top. Now, of course, a lot of their answers, like Oblivion Ring, can, of course, remove the Nissa. So they're not totally cold to her or anything. But, in terms of stuff like Journey to Nowhere, Ruined Halo, yeah, that stuff is not going to do it against our ability to animate any of these lands here and send them in as a 5/5. So Nissa Vital Force, with a little assistance from our Treetop Village, turned the corner so quickly, and once the clock started, it was just a 3-turn clock. We hit for 5, then we hit for 8, and then we hit for another 8, and they are down from 20 to -1. That is that. Liliana of the Veil, running them out of a lot of resources and forcing them to spend an Oblivion Ring on her. We, of course, had another one waiting in the wings that continued to grind them out. We had some discard. This Maelstrom Pulse was pretty clutch as well. But, hey, we, because that suppression field definitely was a tough one for us. Otherwise, very, very good against both of our Planeswalkers, obviously, but Field of Ruin seemed pretty nice there too. It took them off of blue, which was relevant. It thinned out their deck of lands, which also seemed relevant. And to be fair, our opponent kind of didn't hit the land drops when they perhaps needed to, and then when they were top decking is when they hit the land. So certainly unlucky for them, but they also still, even though they had a lot of stuff on the board, they still kind of had a long way to go to deal with us. We were doing a lot of good things. And of course, if we draw any kind of an answer to the ley line at any point there, and we did have a fair few dead draws, then Liliana of the Veil just ults and they are just in deep, deep trouble. So, pretty cool game. I really tend to enjoy the matchups where our cards like Maelstrom Pulse and Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy get to hit non-creature permanents, right? Like, a lot of these decks operate on these unusual axes, and they get a lot of power out of those because enchantment removal is just not that common in Modern, especially in people's main decks. It's just not that common. So it ends up, a lot of their games end up being like, do my enchantments line up well against whatever your linear strategy is? Or do you just bypass me, or do I just totally lock you up? A lot of their game 1s will be like that, and then game 2 and 3 it might be a little bit different. But with us, every single game is kind of like a post-sideboard game, in the sense that like we have answers to what they're doing. And of course, in the literal post-sideboard games, we get a lot more refined and a lot more fine-tuned, and get to shed the deadwood and be really well equipped to face a deck like this. Now, this is not a tier 1 deck or anything, but I don't know about you guys, but I've been seeing it a fair amount online. It certainly crops up not infrequently, so it's a good one to know how to face. I think we are favored, but they do have certain progressions where, you know, Leyline can really stymie us early game, and then if they curve out nicely, we can be in some trouble. But this is a really interesting one. I had a lot of fun playing this, and the opponent played well, so good game, well played to them, but we did get there in the end, winning both post-sideboard games. So that's about that. If anyone has any special insight into this archetype that we just faced, feel free to share it in the comments below, as always. But that about wraps it up here. So as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are continuing to enjoy the content. I know that I'm continuing to enjoy creating it. So thanks for tuning in, and keep your eyes on the channel, because there's always more gameplay coming your way in the near future. Until then, hope you have a great day, take it easy, and we'll talk to you soon.